The first time I came to Shavers Fork was in 1976, and I was a brand new graduate student at West Virginia University, and I stepped out on that river, and the setting and all of it, it was like I was just teleported back out west. And I just couldn't believe it. I had no idea that West Virginia had a resource like that, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And as I was standing there just marveling at it, my sponsor said, "Yeah, well, it dies every year." And I said, "What do you mean it dies every year?" And he said, "Acid rain. And every winter when the snow melts, all the fish die."
Over the years, there have been many stewards of the Shavers Fork River. To West Virginians, the Shavers Fork was once a source of prosperity, and then later of ecological collapse, and now of successful restoration. To understand Shavers Fork, one must understand the land that she is a part of, Cheat Mountain, and the relationship between the land and the water. Cheat Mountain is an exceptionally high and rugged ridge located in the Allegheny Mountains of eastern West Virginia. It is 50 miles long and 5 miles wide.
There is more land above 4,500 feet in elevation on Cheat Mountain alone than there is in all the mountains of New York, Vermont, and Maine combined. That means for eastern North America, it is special. It has more spruce than anywhere south of the Adirondack Mountains. And it's just not the spruce forest of the north. It's the spruce forest of the north and the species you find there combined with the spruce forest of the south, of the mountains of the Smokies, Tennessee and North Carolina, and the species you'd find there. That makes it one of the most diverse landscapes in the Appalachians.
For thousands of years, the mountain was home to an ancient and dense red spruce forest.
When the red spruce first became established was right after glacial times. They grew up to as much as 4 feet in diameter and maybe 80 feet tall, but most of them were 2 feet. They were so thick.
I would give anything to go back to 1880 and walk around the region that we're sitting in right now. The little remnants of old growth spruce and old growth hemlock that we have, little patches that exist, are tiny and still spectacular. They said it was so dark in the middle of the day you couldn't read a newspaper while you were walking through the woods.
In the 1880s and the 1890s, there was an entomologist at West Virginia University named A.D. Hopkins. A.D. Hopkins made several visits onto Cheat Mountain, and in those visits he described walking through these spruce forests and trying to fight your way through the limbs and how dark it was underneath. You know, they couldn't take their horses through. But the most difficult part was actually walking itself. He talks about being near Cheat Bridge and walking up through the forest. He wasn't walking on soil. He was walking on layers of organic material that was so deep that when they were walking through, they'd break through and would find themselves wedged among rocks underneath up to their hips.
Paper and lumber industries recognized this area, rich in natural resources. At the southern foot of Cheat Mountain, the West Virginia Pulp and Paper Company founded Cass in 1900. A mill town where logs were cut into lumber and shipped out.
And of course, Wilbur and Orville Wright They bought lumber from this mill to make their plane.
Nashville got their pine out of spruce for the guitars, and they started the Grand Ole Opry.
Madison Square Garden was floored with spruce lumber from Cass. Those big trees made the highest grade lumber.
In 1904, the town of Spruce was built near the top of Cheat Mountain to support the pulp and paper mill.
My dad was born there in 1913. There were a series of houses along the railroad tracks.
Virgil Broughton recalls what it was like living in Spruce.
My granddaddy worked there in 1882. My granddaddy got associated with a big lumber company up here at that time. This is a beautiful setup, this right here. That's not only a foundation for the old pulp and paper mill, that's the foundation of Spruce. That's where it got started. We stayed here for quite some time. Matter of fact, from 38 to 46. When my dad first started on the railroad, he ran the number 4 Shay engine. He was an engineer on the Western Maryland Railroad up and down these rails for 44 years and 6 months. My mother dearly loved this place, and she raised 6 of us up here, or 4 of us kids, plus putting up with Dad, which was another 3 or 4 kids, with no utilities. You can see the main pipe on the other side of Spruce. We had a water line hooked into it, and that little water line came under the kitchen window, and it ran all the time, didn't have no cutoff valve on it. And when Mother would go to make coffee or do some baking, she'd have to strain it to get the little tadpoles and minnows out of it.
High up on the Shavers Fork, this town had no access by road. The rail line was its only connection to the outside world. Spruce was home for the Shays locomotives. Trains transported timber safely down the dangerously steep grades.
They're Shay engines, that's the name of them. A normal engine, they can go up 2, 3, 4% grade, where we got grades here 11%. And they were special built for steep grades. They're made where if one wheel spins, every wheel under it's got to spin. That's where you get such traction.
They utilized 12 locomotives. The trains extended their reach deeper and deeper into the forest as the logging progressed. The company had 1,000 men working on Cheat Mountain, with up to 6 logging camps in operation.
Those old lumberjacks, they'd take a thermos of coffee and those cookies, they'd live on that for 2 or 3 days and cut timber. Through here, you would call them just, it was a little bit larger than the old outhouse today. There's all kinds of little shacks. That's where your old lumberjacks stayed. They'd have a little stove and a little cot. And they'd live there, and then they'd go down to the big mill there and they'd get their breakfast and their lunch and supper.
I used to ride up on the train on the old log cars, go back and watch the skidders work up there. And they had cables that ran out through the woods for 3,000 feet. And it was this buggy that ran on that cable, and they'd bring the logs right through the air. And then they'd load them on the cars with a steam loader, and then bring them down the mountain to the mill.
The Shavers Fork flows right down the top of Cheat Mountain. It is the largest high-elevation river east of the Mississippi.
30 miles below its head at Snowshoe Ski Resort, it's still at an elevation above 3,000 feet in elevation. There's nothing like that in the east until you get far to the north, where all of a sudden you're so far north in eastern Canada that you can get the same ecological effects.
It's reasonable to assume that the river in those days was shadier, darker, narrower, cooler, and perhaps most importantly, probably had a lot of wood in it.
The stream was choked with logs and root wads, the bottom of the tree that's sticking out in the water. Now those things serve the same purposes as rocks. They're places for fish to grow, and they're a good thing.
At the turn of the century, anglers had discovered the best brook trout fishing on the East Coast and established the Cheat Mountain Club, a getaway for the ardent sportsman.
150 years ago, the tree canopy shaded much of the river. By doing that, it kept it very cool. Cool is what you need for trout water.
All of the anecdotal evidence is that very large fish, by large I mean 15 to 18-inch fish, which is twice the size of some of the largest fish that we see now, were very commonly caught up here.
My great uncle Bob, who lived along the river, that we used to come there and spend a day with and fish at the Cheat River right there. He knew where the big trout lived in the river. There'd be a special rock or a cove that he'd like to fish.
I think I missed more school than I went so I could go fishing. And before Dad would leave, he'd say, "Now, don't you leave the yard, because it's dangerous running up and down that railroad track." And we'd get down there about a mile downriver, and we'd hear that train coming up down there blowing the horn, whistle, and we'd head for home. And Dad would walk in that yard and say, "You boys been home all day?" "Yes, sir, we've been sitting right here." There'd be another train leave later maybe, and we'd hook that train on the tail end and jump off and fish back. If I caught my grandkids doing that, I'd be in the death today.
So this section of the river is a good section of the river, so good we call it a reference reach. It has all the parameters that are necessary for brook trout to make this a home. The water is cooler here because it's shaded and because it's better oxygenated because there are riffles up above us. For Upper Shavers Fork, this is as close to pristine as it gets these days, 150 years after it was first settled.
Say my first trout fishing experience was up here on Shavers Fork. I always wondered, why do I have to go miles away to fish when I got a river right there next to my house? But there was nothing in it.
You started off with an industry that was very profitable for this area. Put this place on the map. But in the process, we weren't always good stewards of the land.
West Virginia is a bit of a colonial economy. Lots of money was made, but that money didn't stay here. That money left. What we were left with is the problems.
They didn't have what we know today as best management practices, and they just cut and cut and cut, with no real concern for the impact that it had on the environment.
And logging companies come in and they cut the timber out, practically all of it. This was the first step, I guess, in the degradation of the river. Because once all the trees were cut, then this resulted in accelerated runoff. And a lot of the nutrients were washed out of the watershed into the river, along with a lot of silt and sediment. This started the initial decline in the river.
Deforestation had profound impacts. A lot of the spruce did not grow back on the riverbanks, and we've got a lot more open situation today than we had then.
We don't have the deep pools. We don't have the total amount of water. I believe has changed over the years. Here at Cheat Bridge, it used to be a couple of feet deep all the way up too. Now it's lean pools, and all the riffles are not very deep.
The river was a lot larger, a lot deeper, a lot swifter back then. They used to float logs down the river all the way to Pittsburgh. This day and age, until the guys got to working on it real good here 10 years ago, you couldn't even float a toothpick down Cheat River.
Some people might say this is a beautiful section of stream. To me, this looks like a biological desert. Here's why. There is virtually no tree canopy closure over the stream here. The trees are way out of where the center of the channel would be. As it spreads out, it's really shallow. There's not much oxygen in the water here because there's not very many riffles. It's overheating as the sun shines on it with no shade. There's no rocks, there's no logs, there's nothing for a fish to hide behind or in. In short, there's very little reason for a fish to be here. The railroad was built so that the spruce forest could be logged. The path that they chose to follow for the railroad was the river, but they didn't follow every curve in the river. They cut off a bunch of those curves, and in doing that, they straightened the river. We had some tributaries on the Shavers Fork that had been cut off by the railroad. Tributaries, for the most part, are where brook trout spawn. And if you're a brook trout and you're coming up that stream, your stream all of a sudden is 3 or 4 or 5 feet above you. It's very difficult to make that leap to get through that culvert and on up into the spawning areas in that tributary. The inability of fish to move into those cut-off tributaries also prevented them from getting to cooler water when they needed to. Over time, the fishing began to decline, the fishery began to decline. The brook trout were relegated in many instances to the smaller tributaries. That's important because as the size of the water that they lived in got smaller, so did the fish. Big fish live generally in bigger water, and smaller fish in smaller water.
The state had to stock the stream clear up nearly to Spruce, I think, from here.
But in general, the river was not extensively stocked until into the late 20s, at which time the anglers began to ask the U.S. Fish Commission to begin stocking rainbow trout.
Men carried packs on their back full of trout. We'll go up so far and release trout.
If fish populations were declining, often the angler's response was just stock more fish, when in actuality the root problem was the habitat itself was failing. So a lot of those stockings, while they provided temporary recreation, didn't do much. They were a sort of a temporary Band-Aid in that regard.
And in '46, it began to go downtrend because of your pulpwood and pine being cut out here. So back in 50, 51, everybody began to move out.
About the mid-1900s, most of that spruce had been harvested. What was left was a town of spruce. For a while served some other purposes to service some of the locomotives that were coming over from the Elk River. With the advent of diesel locomotives later on, they didn't need to service those steam locomotives at Spruce anymore. And so it essentially was abandoned.
In 1961, the lumber mill in Cass closed its doors.
Started in 1902 and operated up till 1960. July the 1st, 1960, they sawed their last logs.
With the demise of the logging operations, those locomotives were subsequently sold to the state and are used today at Cass Scenic Railroad State Park at the southern end of the mountain. Those shays, as they operate out of Cass State Park, have been a very popular tourist attraction over the years. We were in a meeting, a bunch of biologists were in a meeting there in Elkins, and a snowstorm came in the middle of the meeting. Ray Menendez stepped out of the meeting and took a snow sample, and this was in Elkins, which is not far off Cheat Mountain. The pH of the snow that was falling right outside the door was 3.2, which is close to the pH of Coca-Cola.
So acid rain starts at the smokestack with sulfates that enter the atmosphere, and it produces sulfuric acid, and that's why the rainfall is so acidic. If it's too acidic, though, it starts dissolving metals. So when you have acidic rainfall and you have dissolved aluminum enters the stream, that is toxic to young fish. They tend to die through suffocation, in fact. Pretty much every year in these acidic streams, you have complete failure of reproductive effort. And it's interesting, there's an ecological term, they're called ecological traps. These are also called attractive sinks. They are habitats that are attractive, but there's no cue to them that that is actually a deadly place in the spring.
So when Joe was telling me that every year the river dies, what he really meant was every year the young fish die. That problem hit a fishery that was already in decline as a result of habitat degradation. By the 1960s had gotten so severe that it was impacting both native brook trout fisheries and the stock trout fishery that we had in some lower parts of the river.
It was most noticeable in the spring when you had a lot of runoff. We noticed this particularly in the stocking program because there were times we couldn't stock in the early spring because of low pH levels. So we would have to be very careful, check the pH levels before we stocked, and then after we stocked we would have to hope we didn't get a big rain event.
During the springtime, you kind of get a double dose of acid entering into the streams. Between the snow melt and the rainfall that occurs, when they occur together, it's just a double whammy to the acid load entering into the stream.
Folks that I consider to be giants in the early days of DNR, the effort that they began just bore incredible fruit.
Sometimes, you know, it's best to let nature take its course, but sometimes I think man has to step in and maybe give a little helping hand. And I think the good Lord looked down and say, okay, you guys are trying, I'm going to help you out, and things get a little better. So.
In the 1960s and 1970s, 80s, on into the 90s, DNR biologists and others were doing a lot of research into the magnitude of the acid precipitation problem and some potential solutions.
The practical approach is to add limestone sand directly to the stream itself.
It's the main ingredient that the stream's lacking in offsetting the acid rain that's coming into the watershed. Springtime is when we try to hit all the streams with the primary amounts of limestone that we're putting in. It's very, very effective just because we have found that the limestone sand particle size is really ideal to intermix with the stream bed, and it builds up in different areas in the pools and so forth of the stream. And every time the water level changes, it kicks that sand particles back up to continue the chemical reaction and that contact period with the acid water. With the limestone sand and the acid water interconnecting with each other, the chemical reaction takes place, finds a common ground with the pH. It's a lot more economical technique in treating, and that's why we've been able to treat so many streams.
We've got fish populations in over 250 miles of streams in the state that wouldn't be there if we weren't applying limestone to those waters every year. And it's one of the most effective brook trout management tools that we have in our arsenal.
I'm proud to be American. I'm proud to be a farmer, and I'm proud that I can have a big part in getting conservation on the ground.
As a sideline, I planted trees for the coal companies upriver. From 84 through 87 would have been the primary years when the big plantings went in. During the spring months, one year I worked 34 men and women. We planted over 500,000 spruce and pine seedlings upriver here.
Beginning in 1999, the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources, known as the DNR, spearheaded a massive effort to restore the river, working closely with research scientists at West Virginia University.
We decided that we would really begin a serious research focus on this river, first to try to describe the problem. So we had some preliminary discussions and talked about potential research projects and settled on Shavers Fork.
It did not take long for me to realize that I didn't know what they had in mind, but I knew what I had in mind for up here, that it was just one big massive research facility.
We probably know more as a result of that work than we do about any other trout stream in West Virginia. That's very important when you're facing the kind of problems that we knew we had up here.
After 10 years of research, the DNR moved forward to the next step.
One of the first things that we did was pull together a planning team, steering committee, and we reached out. We cast a pretty wide net.
It was a multidisciplinary planning team with biologists and plant people, and I was the engineer.
What makes this project interesting right out of the gate is the people. It's pretty phenomenal when you see that people can look at a problem from a different perspective but see the benefit from their perspective. There's just like this cumulative effect that happens and everybody gets really revved up.
I was startled that they was going to spend that kind of money up here to do what? Once I seen the passion of Steve, Paul, and the DNR and WVU and the numerous others who come up here to try to restore this so that others could enjoy it, they had me.
And we brainstormed about priority places to try to address these priority problems.
There were 3 cutoff streams that blocked fish passage: Beaver Creek, Lamoth Run, and Oates Run, as well as one section of the main stream halfway up that caused the river to significantly overheat.
It was doing that because there was a crook in the river and it flowed from west to east, which meant it got sun all day in the middle of the summer and just baked. That was a priority.
And what looked daunting, because how do you fund it? How do you get the various parties to come together? How do you even get landowners, including some of the big landowners like the Forest Service, engaged, which they now are? At the beginning seemed like, man, that's going to be a long road to take.
For the last few years, my role has been in coordinating, working with partners, making sure that everyone's on board and making sure that we have the right funding streams.
The project would be so expensive that it couldn't be funded from just one source.
We essentially patched the funding together from so many sources.
Congressman Alan Mullahan played a critical role in obtaining funding.
To actually go in and try to do restoration work on some of this water is a very difficult proposition because you need heavy equipment, you need heavy materials, and you need to get them, 10 miles up the river.
There's no roads that go to the site. For me, that was the first time I'd ever had a project like that.
The railroad that served the logging industry that caused much of the problem up here had to be part of the solution.
Another problem, though, was that the track was owned by DGVR, the Durbin and Greenbrier Valley Railroad, and the track was used frequently to take tourists up Cheat Mountain. The only way to do the restoration was to ask the railroad to stop its business operations.
Yeah, it didn't go all peaches and cream to start, but Paul Kinder and I practically got into a fist fight over this. But anyway, when we all settled down and thought about it a little bit, it kind of made sense that what they were doing was bigger than what we were doing. In order to make this work, we had to stop running the trains here for about 2.5 years. Anything that would improve the stream for fishing, for wildlife habitat, is really what should happen. People come to ride the train to see these things.
When we worked on the Beaver Creek project up here, we had really narrow time constraints. We only had a limited amount of time that we could actually be on the track.
Anytime you're putting in large structures under the railroad, you have to completely tear it apart, put it back together, and put all your structures underneath and build it back up again.
So initially, we had designs to do construction through bridges, but midway through the project, it became clear that bridges were not going to be possible because bedrock was so deep underneath the rails.
So there we sat with this really tight time window, and the principal solution we had engineered couldn't be done.
And if we didn't do it, our money was going to expire. If we had to wait another year, and all this groundswell of will that we had to get this done would just dissipate.
Most people probably said, okay, that's it, we can't do it. We sat down one afternoon before a weekend and said, okay, what are we going to do?
I was able to convince everybody that if we got ourselves a 10-foot diameter pipe, which is gargantuan in size, that we could do something maybe not unique, but certainly innovative and better for the fish. So over the course of a weekend, we acquired a 10-foot by 20-foot piece of corrugated pipe.
We had designed a 3-culvert array with a simulated stream channel inside the main center culvert that was borrowed from some really good work that had been done in Canada and Vermont. And the internet's a wonderful thing now that you can pull this stuff together.
And we built a series of steps to get up to the pipe. We filled the pipe halfway with rather natural material, rocks and logs, some of which were hewn with a chainsaw, myself doing the carpentry, so that the fish would feel at home in their brief passage through the railroad.
That little team of about 4 people pivoted like that, and we got it done inside the window and got off that track in time. Those sorts of things just played out time and time and time again because of the quality of the people we were working with and the expertise that they brought to the table.
The team turned their attention to the second cut-off tributary, Oates Run. Bringing in the required material was Shea Engine number 5.
There is some irony in that we need the railroad, but the railroad is the thing that created the need in the first place. If we didn't have it, we'd be waiting a lot longer to see the improvements to the stream that we're making all along.
The second phase was a whole lot quicker because we changed the design on it. We cut the cost down from the first project to the second project just simply because we was using a different type of method.
The team installed a liner with prefabricated baffles to enable fish passage. The liner was inserted into the existing pipe, then grouted into place. A small series of step pools was added leading up to the mouth of the pipe. At Lamothe Run, the team used an approach similar to Beaver Creek to restore a tributary that had been completely cut off. Shay number 4. The same locomotive that Virgil Broughton's father had served as engineer for 44 years, delivered the material to reconnect the last severed tributary.
God gave it to us. Let's take care of it. If we do anything with it, let's either increase it, make it better than what it is, or leave it alone.
They again used a baffled pipe system installed directly under the tracks. Step pools were also added to ease fish passage.
What we try to do is create something that other railroads throughout the country could use to reconnect the streams. In doing what we did with the design that we come up with, we could do it very quickly and easily, and it could be used on any railroad anywhere.
In that problematic section was going to be extremely expensive. In the neighborhood of $1 million a mile.
In a neighboring watershed, the NRCS and Tygarts Valley Conservation District were building a dam. As a part of the process, they were required to do stream restoration work, but it couldn't be completed near the new structure.
The Shavers Fork project came up. We had to do it somewhere, but I was a little not upset, but you know, there was no road up there. The only way to get there was by rail. So I thought, surely there's another place we could do the mitigation. But when I went up on my own, looked at the Shavers Fork, and I thought, you know, well, it is a good project. So I went back to my board. We talked about it a little bit, and I said, let's just make it the Cadillac project. I want to let the public know exactly what we did on the Shavers Fork project.
A mile from Beaver Creek, the Tygarts Valley Conservation District began their stream restoration project.
One of the things we were able to do was identify specific areas in the river where it rapidly heats up.
The bottom of the river was real shallow and flat and wide. Basically in the summer when the water gets real low, it acts like a solar collector and heats the water up. The only place we would see concentrations of fish is in a few pools that were deeper, and there weren't very many of them. We try to see how God did it first and then try to replicate that.
The result was a state-of-the-art array of restoration structures to narrow and deepen the stream channel and intercept cool groundwater in the deepened runs.
This is a J-hook. It's designed basically to funnel flow to the center of the channel and to keep that center channel relatively deep, to maintain itself over the years without having to have somebody come back in here and redo it. Between the tributary work and the main stem work, we've got about 16 miles of benefit out of this.
I feel very good about the structures that we put in up there. They've been tested by at least 4 or 5 big flood storms, and they've done fine.
Some said, oh, it wouldn't hold, but it's holding.
That's one of the more satisfying things about being a civil engineer, seeing your projects built and functioning.
We are seeing more fish in more places for longer periods of time than was the case prior to the restoration.
We were able to show with actually a genetic analysis that fish immediately started moving into Beaver Creek the year after that culvert was replaced. So that was exciting.
That's a really great feeling. It's just like opening the door to
So I am hopeful, but I'm cautious. I'm very interested in seeing what happens with the population over the next 10 years or so. And I'm also interested in seeing what fishermen think of the work that's been done and how well they enjoy it.
Going to a stream that now has an expanding, thriving population of brook trout is a really exciting thing to do. That's what, as an organization, gets us up in the morning and keeps us going out every day.
Since 2010, the Forest Service has been working with the Canyon Valley Institute, the Nature Conservancy, and other partners to improve soil conditions in the watershed, making it easier for newly planted trees to survive and helping maintain consistent water levels in the river. The project partners also planted hundreds of thousands of native red spruce trees.
I think the work that we're doing is furthering that cause of maintaining the habitat in as good a condition as we can achieve. And it's work that people, when they find out what I do, will shake my hand and say, thank you for what you're doing. It's happened, and just when you think that the things are kind of tough and they're challenges, and you think, am I the right person for the job? And somebody will say something like that to you, and you meet people out when you're out doing this kind of work, and they're grateful for what you're doing. I didn't think I needed that, but it makes all the difference.
But the work that's been done has helped, and I'm proud to say that, you know, that I had some small part in all of that.
But it's coming back, and I just hope I'll live long enough to enjoy it again like I used to.
I'd like to think I could walk out from where we are right now into the river here and catch a trout. You know, that's amazing. You couldn't always do that. For a period of years, it was down, it was low.
It's just been an amazing trip. If I retired tomorrow, I would feel pretty satisfied about where we've come to. At this point, it's a stop along the way. There's a lot more to be done. I think what we're talking about at this point is actually taking logs and incorporating them into some habitat structures in the stream in modern ways that help the river re-sculpt itself. I'm imagining the river in that condition, and I can see it in my mind, right? And I think that's sort of the next chapter.
We can take what we've learned from Shavers Fork and start expanding. It can become a model of brook trout conservation and Appalachian watershed conservation regionally.
There you go.
Something that we haven't really talked very much about, the upland restoration, includes planting millions of red spruce trees that are native to the region.
Loosen up, put around.
A really unique complement to the work that's been done in the streams.
So there's a lot more to be done, but we are bringing the forest back, and those wonderful conservation values are going to be able to continue for generations.
I want people to understand how critical it is to have clean water and how much joy that you can get from playing in a stream. You don't have to be a fisherman. Hunting for tadpoles and salamander eggs is one of the most fun things you can do. That sense of wonder and discovery is something that I try to get other people that we work with to feel.
I want to see a lot of people get exposed to this just like I did, because it changed my mind on how I looked at a lot of things environmentally. I think by having some type of educational thing where they can see what's going on, walk beside it, understand what a J-hook is, just like I did. I had to learn it, and then once they learn it, I think they'll enjoy it, and it'll make it great for everybody in the future.
I envision the railroad being a conduit to bring people here, to do various outdoor activities, to make it a sustainable situation and not something that our love of the property destroys it, like we're seeing in some of the national parks.
When I look at it, you know, I have grandchildren, but I want to leave something for them. And maybe they'll even look at that and say, you know, my grandpa helped save that.
And as a biologist, I feel a very strong sense of service and obligation to the broader public. I see a lot of people give government a really bad rap these days. It seems to be in fashion to criticize government and government programs and government employees. The ones I work with, they're not doing this work for themselves. They're doing it because they care about those resources and because those resources belong to the people of this country and the people of this state. And those are our clients, those are our customers, those are the people that we serve.
I can see a lot of the places where I used to go, particularly hunt, you know, are now shopping malls and 4-lane highways. And conservation to me means, as I mentioned, trying to, you know, protect something for my grandchildren and for everybody else's grandchildren. You know, I would like to be able to come back in 100 years and look at this area and say, yep, it's better than what I left it.